Hello and welcome to everyone to the 50/50 Festival and this particular special session looking at representation in music. It's fantastic to be joined by a brilliant panel who will be talking all about representation and 50/50 shortly. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Nina Goswami. I'm the BBC's Creative Diversity Lead for the 50/50 project. So I oversee the project at the kind of overall scale, I suppose. But for the uninitiated about 50/50, it is a project which looks to increase women's representation across content. So we have three kind of core principles at the heart of it. Number one is that we use data to affect change. We monitor what we make to see if we can reach 50% women over a set period of time. We have a second core principle, which is we measure what we control. After all, we can only really make change where we control something. So that's why that rule is there. And number three is the most golden rule, and that is that we never compromise on quality. After all, what we're trying to do with 50/50 is diversify the voices that we have on our content to enrich what we're doing in our particular content. And that is exactly what our panelists have been doing in their particular music. So I'm looking forward to delving in and finding out more with them shortly. But before we do that, we would be slightly amiss not to play some music in a music session. And we've been really fortunate that our colleagues at BBC Introducing have found us such an artist. Their role is to find that new talent, those new artists, and they've done exactly that for us today. Luce has done a special performance for us. She really wanted to do this to support us and because she really believes in equality as well. So let's hear her track, her performance, and it's called Counting Houses.
All these eyes from the side under blue lights making you confused. I'm selfish, I know that now's not the time. Sure, they wouldn't mind if you'd wanna leave and follow me home. I know you'll be alright, and I promise you'll never have to get used to the cold. Cause luckily I know some places well insulated. So into the city as we walked out the door, removed your jacket in the silence you wore. That's all I ever ask you for. Oh no, counting houses on the street where we lay, devoid of color and too neatly arranged. The scene we painted anyway. No, and no, oh no, 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 oh no, oh no, no, no. You know we could frame it and hang it upon the wall. When the leaves start to fall in the autumn, all that we sought will start to unfold. We can move to the sea like we wanted, out of the forest into a home, with pillowcases and shades that you're fond of, tossing the whole way made out of gold. Eventually we'll have a place and well insulated. So into the city as we walked out the door, removed your jacket in the silence you wore. That's all I ever ask you for. Oh no, counting houses on the street where we lay, devoid of color and too neatly arranged. The scene we painted anyway. No, no, we'll let them cast their doubt. We can live without all their thoughts around. And we've been through it now. Patience has run out. We'll prevail somehow. Into the city as we walked out the door, removed your jacket in the silence you wore. That's all I ever asked you for. Oh no, counting houses on the street where we lay, devoid of color and too neatly arranged. The scene and we painted anyway. No, Oh no, 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 oh no, oh no, no, no. You know we could frame it and hang it upon the wall.
That was absolutely fantastic, wasn't it? So her track is called Counting Houses. And if you'd like to hear more from Luce, you can obviously go and check her out online. It's Luz in terms of how to spell her name when you're looking for her. And we'll also pop in the chat her Instagram details. And while I'm talking about social media, please do feel free to use the hashtag 5050 project to talk about this particular session or any of the different sessions that you hopefully will see across the 5050 Festival. And we're hoping to make this a very interactive session. So please also use the Q&A function in the Zoom boxes so that you can ask your questions to our panelists. So let's get to the panelists. Let's dive into representation, dive into 5050 and how people are making use of it across the music industry. I'm going to start with Millie Carter, who is from BBC Introducing. Millie, hi, how are you?
Hi, Nina. I'm good, thank you. Hi, everyone. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining us. You've been looking at 5050 and implementing it in Introducing for actually quite a while now, a couple of years, I think, when it was the first time we met each other. Do you want to tell us about the challenges that you've faced and, you know, how you've improved, what your journey's been along the way?
Yeah, so I think firstly, Nina, you're a great help. It's just hearing passion from somebody else within a project, and then it's communicating that to the teams, because you don't want them to think that it's an additional workload, which it's not. It's about making change, and specifically within Introducing, we're working with artists at the very beginning of their career before giving them their first radio play, their first festival slot. So it's if we're creating balanced output, and the local Introducing shows across the country playing and making sure that they've got that 50-50 split, they're then ultimately helping the change in the music industry. So it was kind of just making sure the teams understood what we were trying to achieve with the 50-50 project. And then as they kind of came up with, like when they went out into the communities, they've been involved in outreach, ensuring their lineups are 50-50, putting out trails on the shows. They started to notice more women uploading. And then if you're an artist and you hear someone that sounds like you on the radio, you're more likely to upload because you feel like you can be a part of that as well.
That's fantastic. So you're having that grassroots impact immediately by thinking about your representation. And I'm assuming that then has an impact in terms of what the productions are. So I'm going to bring in Hayley from Something Else here. Hayley Clark, are you with us?
Hiya, yes. Hi, Nina.
Hi, Hayley. Thank you so much, and for everything that you Something Else do. You have many of your shows involved in 50-50. Tell us about what it looks like for you guys.
Yeah, so we're a production company, for anyone that doesn't know, and we make a lot of programmes for the BBC and wider as well. So we were quite early adopters of the 50-50 scheme, which was great across all of our Radio 1, 1Xtra, Radio 2, 6 Music shows and beyond. And we've sort of used that 50-50 benchmark now to sort of widen that out amongst the non-BBC programmes that we make as well, and podcasts, which is a huge area that we are sort of propelled into now. I work in music shows predominantly, hence being here, but we do make a lot of programs across the board in speech and podcasts as well. So it's sort of just, as Millie was saying, understanding the reason behind doing it and not putting the pressure of the workload onto people, but like really getting the perspective as to why we're doing this, not just for the BBC, but beyond that as well.
And you talk about kind of the impact on the music shows that you're doing. Have you got kind of a practical example of how that's kind of worked for you?
Yeah, so having spoken to you and your team, it's great to hear that our teams are doing really well. I think you were saying it's about 56% of our shows are hitting 50-50, and there's been a 12% increase in that since we started, or at least in last year. So it's like small incremental changes, but it really will eventually make an impact, and it's not, not scaring people into going, oh, you're not doing too well at the start. Just keep that momentum up. For me, I started when I was doing Jam Supernova on 1Xtra, and it was an all-female team, myself and my AP, and Jams herself all being female. And we thought we were going to nail it immediately. And actually, once you start breaking down that data, realised that we weren't hitting it every week. And because we weren't logging it, we just thought anecdotally we were fine. And then once you recognise that, you might be a bit male heavy that month or whatever, it really helped us sort of schedule our planning of our shows in advance, which is great as a producer anyway. You really do want to be working like 4 weeks ahead in terms of getting your show content together. So yeah, for us it was a real eye-opener, and we're a team that thought that we were already kind of aware of that challenge, and even we weren't hitting it. So yeah, I think it really helped to galvanize us from there.
That's fantastic. It's actually a really similar story that you hear, not just in music, but across different parts of content. So when we started back with Outside Source in the news room, that particular team thought that they were reaching 50-50 in terms of their representation, and they found actually they were nowhere even close. And again, as you say, understanding your particular product and then being able to then plan for it makes such a difference. So, and I'm wondering how impactful that is across the industry. So I'm going to bring in our third panelist here, Maxi. Are you with us? There you are.
Yes. Hello, Nina.
Hey, Maxi, please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself and Key Change, and what you're seeing across the industry at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and Key Change. My name is Maxi. I am the UK project manager for Key Change, and I work for PRS Foundation. And PRS Foundation funds new music. We have a partnership with BBC Introducing as well. I'm also a drummer. I play drums in 2 bands and have had my own amazing journey with BBC Introducing too. So it's a real honor to be here to talk about Key Change. And Key Change is essentially an international movement and network for gender equality in the music industry. And we have 3 strands to our work. The first strand is a pledge, much like the 50-50 project. We encourage any type of music organization to achieve 50% representation of women and gender minorities. But we encourage that in any area of the music industry. So we have all types of organizations signed up to the pledge who commit to achieving that representation in any area of their work. So it can be in the boardroom, it can be on festival stages, it can be in your workforce. And basically you commit a time frame, and then we collect data every year, and we're working sort of on a 5-year timeline for that. So we don't release reports every year. We are working towards a big report in 2024. And we currently have around 475 organizations from all over the world signed up to that pledge. And alongside that work, we also have a talent development program, which is funded by Creative Europe. So every year we work directly with 74 women and gender minority artists and innovators to help them get to the next stage in their career as well. So working with organizations on the pledge and then with individuals on the talent development program, I think makes sure that our targeted action is kind of meaningful and long lasting. And Jam Supernova, actually, who was just mentioned, was one of our participants in 2018 on the talent development program. So it's been amazing to see her success on the BBC, and kind of that nice collaboration between Key Change and the 50-50 project as well.
That's fantastic. You've just brought it full circle for us, Maxi, which is great. So let's bring Millie and Hayley back in, and let's start doing some Q&A, I think. Please don't forget, you can use the Q&A function in Zoom for us. If you have any questions, that would be great. But I'm going to kick us off. You mentioned festivals, and I'm thinking, we've spent a year in lockdown. You know, it stopped festivals. And I'm interested to know from all of you, from each of your perspectives, what impact that really has in terms of finding new artists, women's representation particularly, and across the industry as a whole. Maxi, let's start with the bigger, global, wider picture first.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I'm sure many of you will know, the effect of the pandemic has been devastating on the music industry, and many of our participants have been, their careers have been paused or set back because of what's happened over the last year. I think that one of our sponsors, the Musicians Union, did a report that a third of all music creators will have to leave the music industry full stop because of this. And so I think because we know women and gender minorities are disproportionately affected by that, it's a very urgent situation that we need to do whatever we can to respond to what's happened and better understand and support the barriers that women and gender minorities specifically are facing in the music industry. And unfortunately, it's no longer kind of at a stage where we can help them to thrive. It's actually helping them to survive at the moment. But I do think that it's not all doom and gloom. In the back to better conversations that everyone's having, we know that everyone wants to go to a music festival this year. Everyone wants to perform at a music festival this year, and so the demand is going to be very, very high. And we view that as a positive in terms of the both the 50% gender pledge, and I'm sure in your work as well, that actually the kind of access to talent at the moment is not going to be on the usual cycle that exists in the music industry, where you kind of tour for 6 months, then you spend a year writing an album, and kind of repeat and have these release campaigns scheduled throughout. There's going to be no such cycles this year. So I think that provides an amazing opportunity for festivals to program awesome diverse talent and really set the standard for what the music industry could look like in the future.
Right. Millie, I think this will be a good one for you to kind of bounce off the back of. I mean, what's your experience been looking for new talent, and you know, what kind of impact is that going to be having for festivals do you see kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I think for us at Introducing, over the lockdown, we've had more uploads, more artists uploading to Introducing than ever. So it's been amazing, and the shows, the local shows around the country have continuously, they stayed on air for the majority of lockdown, so they've been able to play out the artist and support new talent. When the festivals were cancelled, we kind of thought of alternative ways to promote the artists on BBC Sounds and on our social media as well. So it's really important for us to continue supporting them. And with our lineups at the various festivals that we would usually be at, we always make sure that they're 50-50 gender split and diverse as well. So that's super, super important to us. And within the Introducing values, like Introducing is always for everyone. And I think, yeah, I guess like looking at the festivals that have been cancelled, like Reading and Leeds, and then them saying they're going ahead again this year, but the lineups are pretty similar to how they were when they were cancelled, and they weren't really they weren't great when they were cancelled, the gender split. So it is going to be strange, as in we've paused for a while, and even talking about artists that have still managed to develop through the pandemic, and then like for example Griff had done one gig before lockdown, and then her next one will be at the Brit Awards. So it's like it's completely like changed the industry. But I think it will be interesting, and from an Introducing point of view, it's something we're super passionate about bringing through the artists to try and change those male dominated lineups.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear that actually what that pause idea, that you know effectively we haven't done anything for, it sounds like, then for a year. We're potentially losing a third of music artists who could have been coming into the pipeline, according to the report that Maxi mentioned. Hayley, what's that then looking like when it comes to the production side of creating shows and what you do?
I totally echo what the girls are saying. It feels like a pause on progress, similarly to sort of the whole global warming thing. Like the pandemic is suddenly, we've felt like we've gone a bit backwards in some respects, but I feel like, and in terms of radio, the way that we see that is, you know, we might have had artists we were supporting from the grassroots up on shows like Jams, which is quite late night, probably where some of them are getting their first airplay, much like Introducing. And then you don't get that follow up, as Maxi was saying about like the touring cycle has stopped, and therefore you're not seeing that next step, which is they might get a showcase or a gig or a festival slot, or, you know, our shows, some of them are signed up to help Introducing, to sort of like, you know, I emailed Millie back in the day when I worked with Jams and up until last year about, you know, artists we'd like to see at, I don't know, Big Weekend or something. So that has had a halt. But I feel on a more positive side, I feel like radio has been a bit of a lifeline for artists, in that if they are putting music out, hopefully they are uploading it or they're sending it to us, or if, you know, if they're signed and getting it pushed out, they are getting a bit of money from that. It's not probably loads, but it's like keeping momentum up. They've got places to feed their music to. And equally, when it comes to shows like Radio 1's Residency, which I've been working on until recently as well, usually we use things like festivals to generate kind of, you know, what's the zeitgeist, who's kind of touring at the moment, getting loads of hype, who's doing the club circuit, for our DJ lineups. And we just couldn't do that this past 2 lineups. We've had to kind of sidestep and go, right, it's more about like the heavy hitters who's not touring, who we can finally get, like someone like Carl Cox or Amelie Lenz, who's a huge techno DJ, who normally we wouldn't be able to get on the radio because they wouldn't have the time. So yeah, it's completely changed, obviously, the way in which we work and how we would normally book our guests and our contributors. But hopefully we've still managed to make some change. In fact, our residency lineup is the most diverse it's ever been since it began. So
that's fantastic.
There's been some positives, but it's out of a pretty awful situation. Yeah,
absolutely. But well, you were talking about contributors, and that, you know, that's the heart of where 50/50 started, was monitoring contributors and experts. We have a question about, you know, how different is it monitoring music? So are you doing things differently to just monitoring your contributors? Because you're looking at your artists, are you looking beyond that? How does it look for you?
So in terms of radio, yeah.
Yeah.
I have an open dialogue with you guys, with Lara, which is great, because there is no one size fits all. Like I said at the beginning, we work on speech and music programs, and they're all very different. They're all across different networks, popular networks such as Radio 101 Extra, also Asian Network, and Radio 2 and 6 Music all have different propositions. So, you know, with Jams, it was like the guests, because we have 2 guests a week. That's quite simple in terms of gender split relatively. But other guests might not have, the other shows might not have guests on a weekly or monthly basis. So we'll just report them annually instead and kind of do it that way. Or something like the residency shows that we make across all 3 networks. We monitor the actual hosts themselves, because they are temporary presenters that might only be there for 6 months, and yeah, you know, they are artists in their own right. They're just coming in, doing a show for a bit, and then, so yeah, it's completely been flexible, and I think we're always looking at new ways we can change it to make it really be impactful for the industry.
Thank you, Hayley. I'm interested also to see, Millie, what impact has it had for you? Have you changed how you're monitoring what you're doing as a result of what we're seeing? Is it the same? Have you had to change anything to try and keep your representation at 50/50?
I don't think so. It's still been, the format of the shows has still been pretty similar throughout the pandemic, just with less live sessions and more at-home sessions, or guests come on via Zoom, and like I said before, just more artists uploading than ever. So I feel like the shows have been lucky in having more choice. So yeah, they've from our side of things, monitoring it has been okay.
Right. We've got a question here from Suzanne Weber, actually for you, Maxi. Super interesting discussion. Good to see a fellow drummer too. So my question is about the type of musicians that are being counted. Are we only counting frontline artists and singers? So that one's for you specifically, I think, Millie and Hayley. And or are you actually also counting women instrumentalists as well? So there's a few different themes in there. Actually, Maxi, let's come to you first, and let's look at the overall representation that we're seeing in the music industry. I mean, how's it looking? Is it moving forwards? Are we progressing in terms of gender representation?
I mean, I think the problems are so nuanced and they're industry wide that I think that it's really challenging to see progress year on year, and often disappointing to see, not just in response to COVID, but to see things like the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative release reports on the Billboard 100, where stats kind of move from, I think it's around like 16 to 20% up and down. And I think actually what's key to that change is initiatives like the 50/50 Project and Key Change as well, and many others who encourage the industry to take accountability in every area possible, because I think only when change happen, only when we all take responsibility will change happen. And I think that like there are, I mean, PRS for Music is the collection society for songwriters in the UK, and the representation is gradually improving. So since PRS Foundation started initiatives such as Women Make Music and Key Change to respond to the lack of representation, it's gone from about 11% said they were women to around 19% said they were women. But in kind of comparison to the population, that's still extremely low, and that's still a lot of talent that we're missing out on, and a lot of music that we're missing. So I think that there are, alongside kind of focusing on representation, like these sort of conscious programming initiatives, I think that the music industry needs to take responsibility as a whole in areas like investment, research, education, and ultimately acknowledging kind of the challenges and the barriers that are currently there.
So that's kind of a leadership thing, really, isn't it? It's trying to have that kind of buy-in from the leadership, and presumably you need more diversity at that top level. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but to create that change.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I mean, it's a massive issue. I think that it's the same as kind of headliners at festivals. You need CEOs kind of not just influencing others to take up those positions, but also making sure that the policies that are put in place have kind of diverse perspectives to inform them, because otherwise we kind of repeat these cycles of exclusionary policies, and it's not just the representation, it's the inclusion that then affects or enforces, I guess. So yeah, I think leadership is incredibly important, and I think that all of us as kind of activists, as women in music, and even just as listeners, have kind of responsibility in kind of challenging our processes to make sure that we are leading by example, and making sure that we are thinking about the opportunities that we're affording people in this industry that we care so much about.
Brilliant. I can see both Hayley and Millie are kind of intensely listening. Let's go to Hayley, and because I thought I saw you scribbling some notes, so I wonder what those were for. Can I bring you in on this one, just to kind of react to what Maxi's just said, but also to answer Suzanne's question about what you're actually counting specifically as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, you caught me. It's because I'll just forget if I don't write notes. It's the ex-journalist in me. So I guess, yeah, going back to the question, it sort of just sparked something in me, because I'm also an ambassador for the F List, which was sort of set up last year as well, or a couple of years ago, but really kicked off in lockdown 1 or 2, which is set up by Vic Bain, and I think she's been working with Key Change and various other partners as well to sort of She released some pretty damning statistics about the lack of women that were signed to labels and publishers in the UK specifically, and it's just one of many sort of grassroots groups that are sort of trying to do something about that. So her logging, so she set up a database, if people aren't aware of it, called the F List. You can go to the website. If you're a female artist, you can create a profile, and you know, it's to kind of, she started making a list of them in a spreadsheet initially and being like, look, much like Millie was saying, there's these lineups that aren't reflective of there are actually women out there, you're just not looking for them. And she's inclusive of gender minorities as well, so it's yeah, it's a really great, and the way that they log it as well is if you've got just one female artist in your band, you are able to upload a profile, because even that is quite minimal in the grand scheme of signings and festival lineups and gigs and things. So whilst there's probably lots of conversations around that, it's still, you're still got gender minority in your band essentially. So we've sort of used the same sort of thing with our logging and on our radio shows if we've got a band with female members in it. But, you know, we're not trying to skew the results. We wanted to be accurate. So, you know, usually is the person who is contributing to the show. So at the moment, we're only really getting people on the phone or on Zoom calls. So it will be them speaking, not the entire band. So, you know, it's just reflecting that. Yeah. I think that's it, unless I missed something.
No, that's great. So I remember actually Millie and I were having a very similar conversation about, like, when we first started looking at introducing, how do we even count? Is it always going to be the main artist, or should it be the group? Millie, what did we end up deciding? I can't remember.
So the way we decide as in how you count each musician is whoever's heard by the audience. So if there's a band of like 4 men and 1 woman, but the woman's the vocalist, then you'd count that as 1 woman. But if she was the guitarist, then it would be like 1 man, I believe. Yeah. Because it's like because it's obviously all audio and radio, that's kind of who the audience is gonna, as a woman, you might relate to or not. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually that's the heart of 50/50, isn't it? It's about the perception of the listener. So if they can't perceive what's happening in your particular content, then, you know, we're not necessarily monitoring it. But we do know as well that there's evidence, lots of evidence out there that shows that if your workforce is diverse, the people behind that you can't see and hear, that if they are diverse, then you're going to hear that change coming through in your particular product. But yeah, 50/50 is a perception. It's what our listeners are hearing. So thank you very much. We've just had another question from Anonymous, who has asked, do you think that music playlists on major radio networks, not just at the BBC, but commercial radio as well, is still heavily skewed male? And if so, why? So let's ask that part first of this particular question. Millie, while you're up.
Yeah, I do think they heavily skew male. I think, again, it goes back, like, I echo what everybody else says. It's making the change from the top and working down. It's also making as many people as aware as possible and constantly having those conversations, whether it's with your colleagues or your friends or your family. And then people will kind of continue those conversations, and it will, and the message will spread. Because we're all chatting and kind of all agreeing with each other. We're like we're the ones that understand that change needs to happen. So you need to reach those people that aren't quite aware of it. And yeah, I do think for it, yeah, I'll go back to the Reading and Leeds lineup. I don't want to damn Reading and Leeds, but it was pretty bad. And there are female artists and bands that are like women that could so easily headline. They're just not being given a fair chance because potentially a male director at the top of a country or music label doesn't think they're good enough. And whereas if there was a balance at the top of that label, the outcome would be completely different. And that's like my personal opinion, but I might have gone off the topic of the question.
All right, no problem at all. But that's the point. You're really passionate about what you're doing, and that's what is going to make the change and make the difference along the way, is that, as Maxi was saying, that we all need to be pushing forward together to improve that representation. So the question was around whether it was skewed male. You've answered that most definitely, and also what needs to be done to improve that, and you've given a few examples there as well. So I'll see if Hayley's got any that she can add to that. Hayley, what would you say? Skewed male, ? And what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a perception, isn't it? So I wouldn't want to say definitely, because I would just be assuming. But I know from speaking to people, I think the music teams, I don't know if they're reporting directly into you, Nina, but I think they are logging the 50-50 split of the artists that they are playing and putting on playlists. But it's, Millie's right. It's who's at the top of those. Like, we get quite often at Radio 1, at least, I can't speak across every network, but they're going to be putting a lot of major label artists up there because that's probably what's selling or being streamed the most, and those artists are signed because they've been signed by these people in a room who are probably mostly male. So there's this huge sort of dichotomy of things that are happening here, and you can't really pin it on one person. It's a societal problem, but I think schemes like 50-50, the F List, Women in Control, there's so many groups, grassroots groups out there, and Key Change that are like lobbying these people, and that's the only way to really point it out to them that you might have your Dua Lipas, but there's not, that's not enough. you need more people coming up from the grassroots.
Yeah, absolutely. And bringing in Key Change, Maxi. So especially high profile chart shows and playlists, how do we make change to those if we feel that they're skewing male?
I think it's like everyone said, and I know I keep saying it, but it's about accountability. And actually, like, that's why the initiatives that Hayley just mentioned are so important, because it's 2021 and the talent is there. There's no excuse anymore. Like, initiatives like the F List have thousands of artists. BBC Introducing has thousands of artists. Key Change, we work with kind of a select few every year, who are kind of handpicked as the future headliners. And so if you just scratch below the surface, you can find that talent. And I think it's about that first step of saying, I no longer want to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. And I think that step is a really difficult one, but it's the vital step that you need to take in this journey. And we're at Key Change encouraging all music organizations at all levels, both the kind of mainstream radio stations and independent labels, management agencies, and things like that, because that step for everyone is really important. I think it's really difficult to accept that you're part of a system that's broken, and that actually you're feeding into that system, and you're damaging the pipeline if you're not committing to change. But actually what we've found is that once you start those conversations, most people do want the same thing. Most people do want greater diversity and equality in the music industry, but they just don't know where to start on that journey. They don't know what that first step might look like. And so what we say is that it's acknowledgement. It's saying, okay, I am part of this, and I want to make change. And there are many initiatives out there who are trying to support people on that journey. And that's why I am hopeful about progress, because I think that the conversations that we have and all of the initiatives working towards this are doing amazing work, not just in kind of changing the makeup of these organizations, but in supporting awesome talent too. So I think that it's kind of a pipeline problem, and I hope that eventually it won't just be kind of it won't be you having to scratch below the surface. It will be that you turn on your mainstream radio station, and hear, just by accident, lots of women and gender minorities, as well as what is the norm now. We're not quite there yet, and we have to do a bit of work to get there, but it's the responsibility of all of us to kind of commit to that and make that change.
And talking about kind of creating that change, we will be publishing some figures which will show that there has been progress in the music industry when it comes to those who've been using 50/50. Obviously, I can't reveal those figures yet because our report comes out on Thursday at 11 o'clock. So please do tune in and find out a bit more about it then. But there's a real good progress story that is happening within the music sector when you look at those who've been involved in 50/50, which is fantastic. And one thing that I would like to pick up with, and I was thinking about when you were talking about trying to change mindsets, and you know, that's part of what we try and do with 50/50, using that data that we, you know, if you understand what you look like now and identify where you can make change, then you can make that change. But you need to have the mindset, you need to have the buy-in to be able to do that. Millie, how have you managed to do that at Introducing? Because you've got a network of programs looking for this talent across the UK. How's that work for you?
So I think it's just like when you and I, Nina, we both launched a project with the teams, and it was just kind of catching up with individual teams. So there's 36 local introducing shows all around the country, and they're all, some are from slightly smaller areas, so they struggle with the amount of uploads they get. Then that means they kind of struggle with the split. And then also, so just catching up with the ones all around the country and talking to them about what they were having issues with, and then thinking of kind of solutions about how we could help them. So it was kind of putting call outs on air, and trails, and spotlighting artists on social media, just to encourage more the teams to upload, and then to help with their understanding as well. I think, did I answer that right? I feel like I answered that.
No, that's absolutely perfect. So, you know, you're talking about their kind of using different techniques to try and get people to think differently. So, you know, by spotlighting the new talent that you're bringing through, you're trying to get others to think about it. And as you say, you know, you did this kind of push, didn't you? To try and highlight that this is 50/50, this is what we're trying to do. We're giving you permission to go out and find the women voices specifically so that we can make that change. And that was a really powerful thing that we saw, and that I hope has made a lot of difference to Introducing. And Hayley, was it something that you've seen at something else?
Yeah, Millie's right in that I think the best approach is to speak to people individually. Like, there's still work to be done across some of the shows, you know, and like they deal with different genres of music, which sometimes can be trickier, or the talent themselves that host the show might not be as open. So you have to have individual conversations with each of them about what works best, and how they monitor might be different, as we've mentioned before.
Did you ever get any kind of pushback from anyone saying, you know, we already have the best artists on?
I think some producers did. I was lucky on the shows I was working on that, you know, like Jams is, as we've all mentioned, like really on top of her game and female. So obviously there is this unconscious bias. I think we all here are obviously fully on board with it, probably because of our gender, and various other things. But you know, other people it might not be in the fore of their minds, but it goes back as well to sort of all of the diversity conversations that have been coming to the fore in the last year is acknowledging that you maybe not part of the problem, but that you might be part of the problem. Like, you know, when it comes to race as well, with Radio 1's residency, we're like, we really need to up our game. You know, we might have got the gender split right, but it doesn't end there. So yeah, there are some producers and presenters that have found it trickier than others, you know, because people don't like to be told that they're doing something wrong. Like you quite often get defensive, and I think that's what's happening with festival lineups. So like getting on the defense instead of acknowledging that, look, it's not a personal attack on you, it's just that you have the power to do something about this if you just accept that something needs to be done, instead of sort of just turning a blind eye to it. And yeah, I think that, you know, works across the board with radio as well.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got another question, which is a good one. So we're an all-female lineup here right now for this particular session. We did ask a few of our male colleagues to see if they would come forward and be part of this panel, but actually brilliantly, they wanted to put forward their wonderful female colleagues to come and talk about women's representation. But how can we make sure that men are part of this conversation and don't feel alienated, and also with other gender as well? Hayley, while you're still up.
I think on my feet. Yeah, allyship's a big thing, isn't it? Still trying to, yeah, I think, I mean, this has sort of encouraged me to go back to some of the other teams. Like, you know, I'm not in charge of them. I have a vested interest in this. So I've been really nerdy about how I log it and doing it on time and all the rest of it. And other teams, maybe not so much. It's just, like I said, not at the fore of their mind, maybe, or, you know, there's other things that there's just pressure to turn things around in content and radio. So sometimes these things, like Millie said at the beginning, you don't want it to feel like a workload. So it's having conversations, I suppose, with the male colleagues about how important it is, really. And I know that they'll be really keen to log other aspects, like we said, about other forms of diversity moving forward as well, not just gender. And some of them might relate to that better than this, you know, and it all feeds in. But yeah, like across the board, it's something else as well. We've set up this Women in Something Else group, which is about all the women in the company having conversations, particularly off the back of things like Sarah Everard case not long ago and various other awful things that have happened in the last year. And that has really helped. And we're all trying to find people that can come in and talk to us about intersectionality and like allyship and how we can actually get to the bottom of that, because I don't think that we have the answers yet, but hopeful.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, one of the things that we're doing at 50/50 is that we're moving it to be monitoring not just only gender, but also ethnicity and disability. And I think that's something else are going to be coming on board with at some point, if you haven't already. Millie, I'll throw the question to you as well about allyship. Is that something that introducing has been quite important?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're really lucky. Everyone kind of understands what we're trying to do here, and I think personally, if you didn't understand, I'd be like, why? Because for so long, I guess Hayley mentioned it earlier, but and maybe Maxi, but it's society that also needs to change. And I think there's probably a lot of statistics that would show that men have kind of in certain situations, like getting jobs and things like that in job interviews, are more likely to get the role over a woman or something like that. So it's like it's 2021 now. If you don't like it, like, wake up. But I know, but you need to be it's just education. And in introducing, we've been super lucky with everyone that we work with, but yeah, I just think, like, hello.
Absolutely. Maxi, hello. What do you say? Education, absolutely. Allyship, how do we keep our male colleagues part of this conversation and create that inclusion across all gender?
Well, I think it's important to say that diversity doesn't just affect women and gender minorities, it affects everyone. And if we all work together to make positive change and to support more people who don't look like us, essentially, then I think that we will have we will be able to kind of not just access more exciting talent, but more talent, more ideas, more innovation across the boards. And so Key Change works with kind of orchestras, with radio stations, but also with record labels and apps and things like that. And so I think that allyship is so important because it's the only way that change will actually happen in a meaningful way. Like Millie said, we're kind of preaching to the converted here, and it's important that we try to make people aware that we're losing talent, and that is devastating for everyone. Of course, there are structures that need to be changed so that people don't experience barriers and hardship in the music industry. but alongside that, I mean, we all like everyone works in the music industry because they love music. And so I think it's important to keep talking about how we can make sure that the best music is allowed to realize its potential, and that is by challenging the damaging structures that exist, and yeah, aiming for that kind of exciting future where people don't have to leave the industry because of their gender or because of their race. Like, that shouldn't be happening, and the future where that doesn't happen is yeah, an exciting proposition for everyone, no matter what your background, gender, or yeah, sexuality, or any kind of protected characteristics that we could talk about.
Thank you. Well, and you kind of brought me on to the point that I wanted to end on, which is about the future. Where do we see the future, and how do we end on a positive and think about those practical steps that we can take to make sure that we are creating that new representative world, so that the music industry is reflective of the world around us? What would be your number one tip, Maxi, while you're up? And you can't say the 50/50 project, by the way.
Yeah. Well, am I allowed to say sign the Key Change pledge?
Oh, you could say that, I suppose.
actually on our website, which is keychange.eu, there is a section called What Can I Do? So it's like kind of giving anyone, no matter who you are, a music creator, an organization, or a listener, a politician, kind of an access point to the change that they can make. But yeah, I think it's just about accountability and trying to move away from that kind of defensiveness, like being open to change and whatever that means.
So having the permission to do something, I call it happy fail, take a risk.
Yes.
Knowing that you might make something really positive out of it, but if it doesn't work, so what? It doesn't matter. Brilliant. Hayley, what would be your top tip?
Gosh, I was just going to say, just being aware of, I from a content creative point of view, just, yeah, what are you consuming? What music are you listening to? And is that reflective in your programs? Or are we just being aware of your unconscious bias, I suppose? I don't know if that's particularly galvanizing, but I mean, I think Maxi's had a really good point there, and I'm going to have to Google those what to do tips.
Fantastic. I think we'll all be doing that shortly. But yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. We have to be careful that we just don't look at things through just our own prism, right? Our own particular viewpoint. So, thinking about what others might be wanting to listen to, others might be hearing, and that's about widening the pool. And that's something that we talk about again quite a lot, is about kind of trying to see if we can hear the voices from elsewhere. So yeah, I think that's a brilliant point to make. Thank you, Hayley. Millie, last but not least, what would your top tip be?
I think we're all really lucky that we're working daily or monthly on these projects, so it's always in the forefront of our mind, and to just be aware that it isn't in the forefront of everyone else's mind. So have those conversations with people, and I think just always be kind and positive, and yeah, and then a change will happen.
Great, thank you. Right, well, we have officially run out of time. This was supposed to be a 50-minute session, and I apologise. I've just realised I've gone over. So thank you so much for being here. Millie, Hayley, Maxi, we really appreciate you being on the panel. Really interesting conversations. And from me and from the 50/50 team, we'd love you all to join us on Thursday to hear those results, because music have done really, really well. I keep saying that, but yeah. So it would be great for you guys to come and join us at that point. And yeah, from our team, please keep on counting and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care.